the bottom of the world lies a silence older than time, a place where the wind has carved its own language into stone and ice, and where every breath of air carries the weight of 100 million years. Antarctica, an entire continent hidden beneath a shroud of white, seems at first glance like the end of the Earth. Yet for scientists, explorers, and dreamers, it may be the beginning of our planet's deepest story. The ice here is not simply frozen water. It is history pressed into crystal. Each layer beneath the next is a page in Earth's diary, written in air bubbles, dust, and ancient storms. But before the ice, before the endless night, Antarctica was something else entirely. To understand what it is now, we must first imagine what it once was. Long before any human eyes saw this land, Antarctica was part of a world that looked nothing like our own. A single supercontinent, Gondwana, spread across the southern hemisphere, binding together what would one day become South America, Africa, India, Australia, and the frozen mass we now call the South Pole. Rivers ran through it. Forests of towering ferns and conifers swayed beneath skies rich with warmth. Dinosaurs roamed among trees that would one day fossilize beneath miles of ice. But Earth, restless as always, began to shift. Continents drifted, oceans opened, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, Antarctica began its journey south. When it finally arrived at the pole, nature performed its quietest act of violence. Cold descended, ice began to bloom. A curtain of frost swept across valleys and forests, turning green into white and life into silence. Today, Antarctica is the coldest, highest, and windiest place on Earth. It holds 90% of the planet's ice, and beneath that, about 70% of its fresh water. Yet, despite the abundance of frozen water, it is the largest desert in the world, so dry that snow can lie unchanged for centuries. This paradox of ice without life, of abundance without motion, defines Antarctica's mystery. It is the only continent with no native human population, no villages, no cities, only temporary camps of researchers who come, study, and leave, like visitors at a cathedral built entirely of snow. But even cathedrals have foundations, and the one beneath Antarctica is astonishing. Hidden under that blinding white shield lies a geography few have ever imagined. Mountains as tall as the Alps, valleys as deep as the Grand Canyon, and lakes sealed beneath miles of ice, untouched for millions of years. In these dark, secret chambers, water still flows. Rivers snake unseen through the frozen crust, connecting hundreds of hidden lakes that have not seen sunlight since before the first humans walked the earth. Lake Vostok, buried nearly 4,000 meters deep, is one such world. Scientists believe it has been isolated for more than 15 million years, an untouched ecosystem sealed away like a time capsule. What thrives there now is uncertain, but microbes have been found in other subglacial lakes, living off chemical energy rather than sunlight. They feed on traces of methane and ammonia, leftovers from long-dead oceans. If life can endure in such darkness, could it not also survive on distant moons, beneath alien ice? Antarctica, in this way, becomes more than a continent. It becomes a mirror of possibility. The story of this place is written not only in its present, but in what lies trapped within it. Fossils found deep beneath the ice reveal that this was once a world of green. Leaves resembling beech trees have been discovered near the Beardmore Glacier, carried and preserved by explorers who never made it home. On Alexander Island, fossilized tree trunks still stand upright in ancient soil, frozen mid-growth, a forest caught in the act of dying. And in the stone, other ghosts linger. The bones of marine reptiles, massive serpentine creatures that swam in the ancient seas surrounding Gondwana, rest near the coast. On Seymour Island, the remains of giant terror birds, 6 feet tall and flightless, speak of an age when Antarctica teemed with life. Even a giant egg, soft-shelled and over 11 inches long, was found here, possibly belonging to a prehistoric sea creature, a mosasaur or a turtle of impossible size. Such discoveries are not relics of a distant fantasy. They are proof that Antarctica remembers. The transformation from rainforest to ice world did not happen overnight. It unfolded over millions of years as Earth's atmosphere changed. Carbon dioxide levels, once soaring above 2,000 parts per million, fell sharply, and with them, global temperatures plummeted. At the same time, a new oceanic current was born, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a vast river of water that circles the continent. It acts like a wall, trapping cold around the pole and keeping warm currents away. Once that current formed, the transformation was inevitable. The lush forests withered, rivers froze, and the land that once echoed with the calls of birds fell silent beneath an empire of ice. Yet even as the cold claimed the surface, life adapted in the dark. What sunlight abandoned, chemistry sustained. Microbes learned to draw energy from minerals and gases trapped beneath the ice, building ecosystems that defy everything we thought we knew about survival. For centuries, humanity had no knowledge of this world. Ancient maps spoke vaguely of a southern land, Terra Australis Incognita, a mythic counterpart to the continents of the north. It wasn't until the early 19th century that explorers began to see it for what it was. In 1820, Fabian von Bellingshausen, a Russian explorer, glimpsed the icy coastline. Shortly after, the British officer Edward Bransfield confirmed the sighting. A year later, John Davis, an American sealer, became the first known person to set foot on the continent itself. To them, this was a new frontier, an unmapped, unclaimed world at the edge of the known Earth. But even they could not have imagined how much it concealed beneath its frozen veil. And so the story of Antarctica begins not with discovery, but with rediscovery. Each generation returns to it, peeling back another layer of mystery, as if the continent itself were a reluctant storyteller, revealing only what it must. Its winds howl across ancient ice, Its mountains lie buried under miles of frozen time, and somewhere below, in the black stillness of lakes untouched by light, the pulse of life continues, soft, hidden, eternal. What secrets does that pulse remember? And how many more are still waiting to be found? Antarctica was not always a kingdom of ice. There was a time, long before humans, before even the first mammals, when this same land bathed in sunlight and thrived with forests. 90 million years ago, the world's climate was warm and humid. Dinosaurs wandered beneath canopies of evergreen trees. In the coastal valleys of what would become East Antarctica, broad-leafed plants drank from rivers that never froze. The air was thick with the scent of resin and soil. Even through the long polar night, these forests endured. They had learned to sleep through the darkness and awaken again when the sun returned. Imagine, for a moment, that lost world. Rain fell where snow now stands. Mountains rose above green valleys, and the ocean lapped against rocky shores. Penguins had not yet evolved. Whales were still land dwellers. This was a temperate paradise, thriving at the bottom of the earth. But Earth never stays still. Over millions of years, tectonic forces began to tear Gondwana apart. The land masses drifted slowly in opposite directions, as if the world were drawing its own curtain across an ancient stage. South America peeled away from Antarctica, leaving behind a widening ocean. Then came the final separation, the opening of the Drake Passage, a deep corridor of sea that would forever change the planet's climate. When that passage opened, a vast current began to circle the southern pole. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current, one of the most powerful on Earth, spun around the continent, isolating it completely. No warm ocean water could cross its barrier. No mild winds could reach its heart. The world had drawn a line around Antarctica, and inside that circle, winter became permanent. The cooling began slowly. Temperatures fell. Rain turned to snow. Forests, once rich with life, froze and died, layer upon layer, until the soil beneath them hardened into permafrost. By 34 million years ago, the transformation was complete. Ice gripped the continent like a hand closing into a fist. Glaciers advanced across the plains and into the sea, grinding stone into powder, carving valleys that still lie hidden beneath the modern ice sheet. And with that great freeze came silence, the kind of silence that only a place beyond life can know. Yet that silence, paradoxically, was never truly empty. In the depths of that cold, the planet was remembering. Each snowfall pressed a new story into the ice, a new record of time. As the millennia passed, these layers grew thicker, thousands of feet of compressed history, holding within them the breath of ancient atmospheres and the fingerprints of forgotten storms. Scientists would later learn to read those frozen pages. Drilling through miles of ice, they would uncover tiny bubbles of air, perfectly preserved, each one a message from a world long vanished. Through them, we would glimpse our own planet's evolution, not in myth or imagination, but in chemistry and cold, hard evidence. In some places, the ice lies more than 2.5 miles thick. It covers mountains, valleys, and entire buried landscapes, ghosts of a continent that once flourished with life. Recent mapping has revealed ridges, river channels, and plateaus so well preserved beneath the ice that geologists call them fossil landscapes. One such discovery, a region the size of Belgium buried beneath East Antarctica, reveals an untouched world sealed away for at least 14 million years. Its valleys remain as they were when the last forests fell, preserved under the still weight of the ice. It is, quite literally, a map of the past lying frozen in time, but traces of that living world still rise to the surface now and then, small fragments caught in stone or embedded within the glaciers themselves. When explorers first began collecting rocks along the frozen coast, they found impressions of leaves, beach-like shapes pressed into the stone like ink on a page. Later expeditions unearthed entire trunks of petrified trees, standing upright in what had once been forests. Some were as tall as a 2-story house, their roots still anchored in ancient soil. In the scattered fossils of Seymour Island, scientists found the remains of prehistoric creatures, the bones of giant marine reptiles, seabirds with wingspans longer than a man is tall, and astonishingly, a colossal soft-shelled egg, nearly the size of a football, believed to belong to a long-extinct sea reptile. Each of these discoveries whispers the same truth. Antarctica has not always been asleep. What, then, caused such a dramatic transformation? The answer lies in the air itself. 50 million years ago, carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere was as high as 2,000 parts per million, nearly 5 times today's level. The planet was warm and lush. Tropical forests grew as far north as the Arctic Circle. But then, over millions of years, CO2 levels began to fall. Whether from shifting continents, volcanic quieting, or the birth of new plant species that consumed carbon more efficiently, the result was the same. The world cooled. The moment the Drake Passage opened, Antarctica's fate was sealed. The new ocean current, racing endlessly around the continent, trapped the cold air within its walls. It was like the closing of a gate, a perfect, self-sustaining chill that turned the land into a frozen tomb. From that point on, Antarctica became Earth's great reflector. Its blinding white surface bounced sunlight back into space, amplifying the cooling effect. In essence, the continent that had once thrived with life now helped to lock the planet into its first major ice age. And yet, even in death, there was beauty. The glaciers sculpted the land, shaping mountains, fjords, and canyons deeper than any river could carve. They ground ancient forests into dust that would drift across the seas, feeding plankton thousands of miles away. Antarctica, though frozen, became part of the planet's circulation, a silent engine in Earth's climate system. Over time, the continent's isolation grew absolute. It was as though the rest of the world had forgotten it existed. Only the wind remained to bear witness, howling endlessly over plains of ice that stretch farther than the eye can see. But nature, even in her stillness, is never entirely still. Beneath the glaciers, under the crushing pressure of miles of frozen water, heat seeps upward from the planet's interior. In certain places, it melts small pockets of ice, forming hidden lakes that pulse faintly with life. Lake Willans, Lake Mercer, Lake Enigma. Each of these worlds is sealed from the surface, cloaked in darkness, yet alive with microscopic creatures. These organisms have no need for sunlight. They survive by eating the chemical energy left behind by long-dead marine life, an ecosystem built on memory. Some microbes feed on methane trapped in the ice. Others draw nourishment from minerals in the bedrock. What they prove is profound. Even in places thought utterly lifeless, life finds a way to persist. For scientists, these subglacial worlds are more than biological curiosities. They are blueprints for how life might endure on other planets. Beneath the frozen crusts of moons like Europa or Enceladus. Antarctica, once again, mirrors the cosmos. It teaches us that warmth is not the only cradle of life. Sometimes the cold remembers too. From the surface, none of this is visible. To the eye, the land is an endless expanse of white and shadow, wind and silence. But beneath, an invisible kingdom stirs. If we could peel back the ice, we would see mountains that rise higher than the Alps, valleys that could swallow entire cities, and rivers flowing silently through the dark. We would see the past, alive beneath our feet. In this sense, Antarctica is not just frozen, it is waiting to be understood, waiting to reveal what it has hidden for more than 30 million years. And perhaps, as we melt its surface and uncover its secrets, it is also waiting to see what we will do next. The silence of Antarctica was first broken not by nature, but by human footsteps. In the early 19th century, long before satellites could see the curvature of its white crown, a handful of sailors and explorers set their sights on the bottom of the world. They came not for glory at first, but for whales, seals, and the promise of untapped riches. What they found instead was the most unforgiving landscape on Earth. In 1820, a Russian naval officer named Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen became the first to record sight of the Antarctic mainland. He wrote of endless walls of ice, vast, ghostly cliffs rising straight from the sea. A few days later, the British officer, Edward Bransfield, confirmed it from another vantage point. Within a year, an American sealer named John Davis stepped onto the frozen shore, leaving footprints that the wind quickly erased. To the world of the 1800s, these men had touched the edge of myth. Maps still labelled this region Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. What none of them could imagine was that this blank space on the globe contained not only mountains and valleys, but entire worlds buried beneath miles of ice. As decades passed, the race southward turned from commerce to curiosity. Scientists, nations, and adventurers all sought to unlock the secrets of the White Continent. This period, spanning roughly 1897 to 1922, became known as the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. It was an age of wooden ships, wool clothing, and impossible dreams. Robert Falcon Scott led one of the most famous expeditions, the ill-fated Terra Nova. In 1912, after weeks of brutal wind and frostbite, Scott and his team reached the South Pole, only to find a Norwegian flag already planted there by Roald Amundsen. On the return journey, they perished in their tent, trapped by a blizzard a mere 11 miles from safety. When rescuers found their bodies, they also found rocks, specifically samples of fossilized leaves resembling beech trees. Even at the edge of death, they had insisted on bringing back proof that this frozen desert had once been alive. Another explorer, Ernest Shackleton, chased a different kind of victory: to cross the entire continent from sea to sea. In 1915, his ship Endurance became trapped and crushed by pack ice. Shackleton's crew drifted for months, marooned on shifting floes, until he led a desperate voyage across storm-torn seas to find help. They survived against every conceivable odd. Years later, some of his men swore they had felt the presence of a fourth companion walking beside them during their darkest hours. Something unseen, yet comforting. In that frozen emptiness, even silence seemed to have a spirit. These early explorers proved what many suspected. Antarctica was not an empty void, but a labyrinth of wonders. Every mile they travelled revealed new questions about geology, climate, and even humanity itself. What drives a person to risk everything for a land that offers nothing in return? After the heroic age came a quieter era of mapping, measurement, and mystery. Technology caught up with ambition. Planes began to fly over the continent, photographing a world that no one had yet seen whole. In 1938, Nazi Germany sent an expedition to a region they named Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. Officially, the mission sought whale oil and mapping data. Unofficially, rumours soon took root. Some claimed the Germans had discovered vast ice-free valleys, even built hidden bases within them. Decades later, these whispers would evolve into legends of secret cities and buried technologies, stories that still echo across conspiracy forums today. A few years after the war, the United States launched Operation High Jump, the largest Antarctic expedition in history. Led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd, it involved 13 ships, thousands of men, and a fleet of aircraft. Officially, the goal was to test military equipment in extreme cold and map uncharted territory. Unofficially, the sudden early termination of the mission fueled new waves of speculation. Had the Americans found something unexpected under the ice? The truth was far more ordinary. Brutal weather, logistical failures, but the human imagination rarely settles for ordinary. Antarctica, remote and sealed from scrutiny, became the perfect canvas for myth. Meanwhile, scientists kept uncovering evidence that outstripped any rumor. Radar surveys in the mid-20th century revealed mountain ranges entirely buried under the ice. The Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, stretching nearly 1,000 kilometers, rival the Alps in height, yet no human eye has ever seen them. Their peaks have been entombed for more than 30 million years, perfectly preserved by the cold. Elsewhere, researchers detected valleys and canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon, carved long ago by rivers that no longer flow. One, beneath the ice of East Antarctica, is so vast it could hold the Alps and still leave room for clouds. It's difficult to comprehend. Beneath a surface that looks flat and endless lies a landscape as dramatic as any on Earth. And then there are the lakes, hundreds of them, locked away in perpetual night. Lake Vostok sits nearly 4,000 meters below the surface, sealed off from the atmosphere for at least 15 million years. The pressure there is crushing. The water never sees light. Yet within it, scientists have found traces of microbial DNA, hinting that life endures even in isolation. Lake Mercer, twice the size of Manhattan, has yielded sediments filled with the remains of ancient marine organisms, evidence that the ocean once stretched far inland. Lake Whillans, smaller but no less significant, swarms with living microorganisms that feed on chemical reactions rather than sunlight. They breathe iron, sulfur, and ammonia. Their world is alien, but their existence is proof that life does not surrender easily. These discoveries have transformed how we imagine other worlds. If life can persist here, in darkness and ice, why not beneath the frozen crusts of Europa or Enceladus? In every subglacial drill sample, scientists see reflections of the cosmos. Not all of Antarctica's mysteries, however, belong to science alone. Somewhere between curiosity and obsession lies the realm of speculation. Satellite images showing pyramid-shaped peaks in the Ellsworth Mountains sparked claims of lost civilizations buried beneath the ice. Geologists call them nunataks, natural pyramidal mountains carved by erosion. But the human mind sees design where nature only carved symmetry. Others point to ancient maps, like the 16th century Piri Reis map, which appears to depict the coastline of Antarctica free of ice. Could it be that ancient mariners once saw a warmer southern world? Most scholars say the resemblance is coincidence, the result of distorted cartography. Still, the question lingers. How could they have drawn what they could not know? Even the most improbable legends contain a trace of wonder. Perhaps that's why we invent them, to fill the gaps that science has not yet reached. Today, satellites pierce the clouds that once hid the continent from view. They measure every shift in the ice, every tremor of the bedrock. And yet, the deeper we look, the stranger Antarctica becomes. In 2018, scientists mapped a region beneath the ice that seemed to hum faintly, vibrations resonating through the crust. They traced the pattern to a hidden river system stretching for hundreds of kilometers, connecting subglacial lakes like a bloodstream. Beneath that, hints of geothermal heat suggest volcanoes still smolder far below the surface, sealed by their own ice prisons. It's a living system, slow, ancient, and utterly alien. The more we uncover, the clearer it becomes that Antarctica is not a frozen corpse, but a sleeping giant. Beneath the frost, the earth is still breathing. To the people who have stood upon its surface, this truth feels almost spiritual. Every explorer who returns speaks of the same sensation. a humbling awareness of time. Here, a single gust of wind can erase footprints as though they were never made. A mountain of ice can crumble overnight, yet the glacier it belongs to has been moving for 1,000,000 years. Standing in that endless white, you begin to feel the weight of impermanence. You realize that nothing truly belongs to us. Not the land, not the past, not even the present moment. Perhaps that is Antarctica's greatest lesson. In its silence, it teaches humility. In recent years, scientists have drilled deeper than ever before, reaching sediments that predate the ice itself. Within these ancient layers, they've found pollen grains, spores, and traces of freshwater diatoms. Tiny algae that once drifted on lakes and rivers long vanished. Each microscopic relic is a word in a language we are only beginning to understand, the language of Earth's memory. Antarctica, they now know, is a storyteller. Its tales are not written in ink, but frozen in air bubbles, sediments and stone. Through them, we glimpse our own planet's shifting moods, its warmth, its fury, its calm, and its fragility. The world may look upon Antarctica as desolation, but to those who study it, it is alive with memory. Beneath the quiet, it hums with electricity, chemistry, and time. And as we listen more closely, one question grows impossible to ignore. If this continent holds the record of our planet's past, what then does it whisper about our future? For all that science has revealed, Antarctica's greatest power may lie in what it still hides. When a place resists understanding, the human mind fills the void with imagination. Antarctica has become the world's final mirror, one that reflects both our hunger for truth and our need for mystery. Beneath its endless ice, we project the ghosts of our own creation myths, our lost civilizations, our fears of what power might sleep below. Some of these tales begin with a shape. In the cold clarity of satellite imagery, certain peaks in the Ellsworth Mountains appear uncannily geometric, sharp, triangular, and solitary amid the rolling white. To geologists, they are pyramidal peaks, sculpted by ice and erosion. But to those who look for patterns in the chaos, they seem deliberate, almost architectural. What if, they ask, these are not mountains at all? What if they are the remnants of an ancient civilization entombed before recorded time? It is an alluring idea that humanity, or something like it, once thrived on this frozen continent before a sudden cataclysm turned paradise into wasteland. That notion finds fuel in ancient maps, like the Piri-Reis map of 1513, which appears to depict the coast of Antarctica free of ice, as though drawn from a memory that should have been impossible. Some historians attribute this to the merging of older charts or artistic speculation, but others whisper that it is a fragment of lost knowledge, a survivor from an age before the freeze. Such theories paint an epic story, an advanced civilization erased by a sudden pole shift, the Earth's crust sliding catastrophically around its axis, plunging once temperate lands into polar night. According to the myth, Antarctica did not simply drift south over millions of years. It was hurled there in a single geologic instant, flash frozen, beneath its own oceans. Science tells us otherwise. The movements of continents are slow, tectonic, deliberate. But still, the myth endures, because the human imagination thrives where the map runs out. Other legends reach into darker history. In 1938, as the world teetered on the edge of war, Nazi Germany dispatched an expedition to Queen Maud Land, a region of East Antarctica. Officially, their mission was to claim territory and scout for whale oil, vital to the Reich's industry. Unofficially, the mission became the seed of 1,000 conspiracies. Some say the Germans found vast caverns of warmth beneath the ice, remnants of volcanic heat. Others claim they established a secret base, a fortress for advanced research, or perhaps refuge after the war. When Allied intelligence later learned of Nazi interest in polar exploration, it only deepened the mystery. No evidence of such a base has ever been found. Yet decades later, the story resurfaced during the Cold War, feeding new narratives of hidden technologies, underground bunkers, and strange aircraft testing in the South. Antarctica, distant and lawless, became a perfect stage for secrecy. After the war, the United States mounted Operation High Jump, a massive military expedition led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Its stated goals were practical: training personnel, testing equipment, and mapping the continent's coasts. But its sheer scale, over 4,000 men, 13 ships, and more than 20 aircraft, invited speculation. When the operation ended abruptly after only a few months, rumors took flight faster than any plane. Some whispered that Byrd's fleet had encountered something impossible: disc-shaped craft rising from beneath the ice, moving faster than any human technology could explain. A so-called diary appeared decades later, allegedly written by Byrd himself, describing a flight into a temperate inner world, lit by an inner sun, inhabited by beings of immense wisdom. Historians dismiss it as a fabrication, a product of myth-making in the age of flying saucers. But the idea that beneath the ice lies another world, another civilization, still captures the imagination. We call this mythical realm Agartha, a city of light, hidden inside the earth, waiting for humanity to grow wise enough to return. It is tempting to laugh at such stories, and yet they persist because they speak to something deeper. Our instinct that the earth is more alive, more mysterious than we allow ourselves to believe. Even in an age of satellites, there remains a part of us that wants to believe the map is not complete. Sometimes, imagination reaches where science cannot yet go. When scientists discovered the vast network of subglacial lakes and rivers beneath Antarctica, it reignited an ancient fascination that under the ice might lie not only microbes, but entire ecosystems sealed away from the world. If bacteria can survive there, could something larger endure? Could those myths of hidden life have been echoes, not fantasies? We do not yet know, but we are learning that even our most far-fetched ideas can contain a seed of truth. Once, it was madness to think that life could exist without sunlight. Now, We have seen it in the black lakes under Antarctica, in the boiling vents of the deep ocean, in the rocks of Mars, where microbes may one day be found. Even the skies above this frozen land hold their enigmas. In 1985, scientists studying Antarctica's atmosphere discovered the hole in the ozone layer, a wound in the planet's shield that allowed ultraviolet radiation to pour through. It was a revelation born of patience and observation, but also a reminder: the greatest threats often hide where we least expect them. The ozone hole became a symbol, proof that even the most remote, untouched place on Earth is not beyond our reach. Our invisible influence had found its way to the ends of the planet. If that invisible damage could reach so far, what else might be possible? That question, too, gave rise to myths of control, secret projects, hidden technologies, experiments under the ice. In every generation, Antarctica becomes a screen for our collective imagination, reflecting whatever fears or hopes dominate the age. For explorers, it was glory. For scientists, discovery. For dreamers, Atlantis reborn. Perhaps this is the deeper truth. Antarctica's greatest mystery is not buried in the ice at all. It is in us. Our longing for the unknown is as old as the planet itself, where science offers data, myth offers meaning, where facts draw boundaries, stories remind us that the world can still surprise us. And maybe that is why, even in the most rational age, we keep returning to Antarctica in our dreams. The last untouched horizon, a place where reality and imagination still overlap. But beyond the myths, the continent itself continues to change, rapidly, dramatically, and not by legend's hand, but by ours. The ice that once sealed its secrets now begins to melt. Glaciers retreat, ice shelves crumble, and the frozen mountains that have held their silence for millions of years are beginning to speak again. And what they are saying may be the most important truth of all. At the turn of the 21st century, scientists began to notice something unsettling. Antarctica, the continent once thought eternal, was changing. The ice was moving faster. Glaciers that had been stable for millennia began to retreat. Entire ice shelves, larger than some countries, fractured like glass and drifted away into the sea. The coldest place on Earth was warming. In just 50 years, the Antarctic Peninsula, the finger of land reaching towards South America, has warmed by nearly 3 degrees Celsius. That might sound small, but here, where balance is measured in fractions, it is enormous. A degree can mean the difference between frozen permanence and collapse. Each summer, more meltwater carves rivers across the ice. Each winter, the sea freezes a little later. Satellite images now show what the human eye cannot grasp: a continent in motion, shedding its armor. When the Thwaites Glacier, ominously nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier, creaks and shifts, it echoes through the planet's oceans. This single mass of ice, the size of Florida, already contributes around 4% of global sea level rise each year. If it collapses completely, it could raise oceans by more than 3 meters. redrawing every coastline on Earth. It is not a question of if, only when. But Antarctica's story is not only one of loss. Even in its thawing, new possibilities stir. Where ice retreats, moss and lichen take root. Along the northern fringes, a green shimmer now stains the white, tiny plants awakening after tens of thousands of years of sleep. If warming continues, scientists predict that by the end of this century, parts of the Antarctic coast may support grasses and even flowers. Within 2 centuries, some regions might sustain limited human settlement without total dependence on imported supplies. It is a strange image. Life returning to a place that once teemed with forests. History repeating itself in reverse. And yet, every gain comes at a cost. For the rest of the planet, that returning green spells rising blue. As the ice melts, the oceans swell. Cities that once stood safely above the tides now plan for futures beneath them. From New York to Jakarta, from the Maldives to Miami, Antarctica's heartbeat can be measured in millimeters of water rising against the shore. We tend to think of the poles as distant, but the truth is this. Every breath we take, every drop we drink, every harvest we reap is linked to that faraway world of cold. The polar regions regulate the planet's climate, like lungs regulate air. When they falter, the whole body of Earth begins to gasp. Hidden within this crisis are messages preserved in the ice itself. In the cores, scientists drill. Trapped bubbles reveal the delicate dance between carbon, temperature, and life. They tell us of past warmings and coolings, of extinction and renewal. And in those frozen whispers, one pattern repeats. Every time carbon rises, the ice retreats. Every time the ice retreats, the seas rise. And every time the seas rise, civilization changes. The story is written clearly. We are simply living in its next chapter. Yet, for all its fragility, Antarctica is also a triumph of human restraint. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, a promise to keep the continent devoted to peace and science. It forbids military activity, nuclear testing, and resource exploitation. It declares that no nation owns Antarctica. It belongs to all, and to none. In the middle of the Cold War, an age defined by rivalry, humanity managed to carve out one corner of the world free from conquest. As of today, nearly 60 nations uphold that agreement. It is a rare moment in history where cooperation triumphed over greed. Still, the treaty's protections are not eternal. The environmental protocol that forbids mining and drilling can be renegotiated by the year 2048. Already, some nations eye the frozen continent's potential wealth, minerals, oil, and fresh water waiting beneath the ice. The question is not whether the temptation exists, but whether wisdom will outlast it. There is another, quieter loss happening too, one less visible than melting glaciers. Every year, as the ice surface warms, meteorites that once rested on top begin to sink. Antarctica's deserts have preserved more space rocks than anywhere else on Earth, holding clues to the origins of the solar system. Now, as temperatures climb, thousands of those cosmic fragments slip beneath the snow, disappearing into the ice forever. Even the stars' memories are being erased. When explorers stand at the South Pole today, they find no mystery in the compass, no dragons on the map, only wind, silence, and the faint hum of machinery from research stations. And yet, in that emptiness, there is something transcendent. You can feel the weight of time pressing down, 30 million years of frozen history beneath your feet, and above you, a sky so clear it seems to reveal the curve of eternity. Antarctica humbles everything human. It reminds us that nature does not need us to be whole. We are the brief flicker. It is the enduring light. Still, there is hope in that humility. When nations gathered to address the ozone hole, it was action, not myth, that healed it. Within decades of banning the chemicals that caused the damage, the atmosphere began to recover. The ozone layer, once torn open above this frozen land, is slowly closing. The world listened, acted, and changed the outcome. Perhaps the same is possible again, because the lesson of Antarctica is not simply that the world is fragile. It is that the world responds. Every cut leaves a scar, but also a reminder that healing is possible. And so, the continent at the end of the earth becomes a mirror. It shows us what happens when we forget our place, and what redemption looks like when we remember it. It shows us that silence is not emptiness, but patience, that the cold is not death, but preservation, that time is not our enemy, but our teacher. In the stillness of Antarctica lies the entire story of our planet, its birth in fire, its transformation in ice, and its uncertain future in our hands. When the last human footprint fades from the snow, when the last research station powers down, and the wind erases all trace of our presence, Antarctica will remain, quiet, vast, and watching. And beneath its ice, our history will rest alongside the fossils and the air bubbles and the starlit dust, waiting for whatever minds come next to find them. Perhaps they will read the layers of our time and understand what we could not, that the planet was never ours to keep, only to remember. At the edge of the world, the wind carries a single lesson. Everything that lives must change, and everything that changes leaves a record. Antarctica is that record, Earth's frozen memory. It tells us who we were, what we lost, and what we still might become. And if we listen closely enough, through the hiss of the storm and the creak of the glaciers, we can almost hear the planet itself whispering, "Do not forget me again."